Welcome back to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel, and in this episode, I welcome Stephan Sieber and Bill Allen. Stephan is the CEO of Chaos, and Bill is the newly minted Director of Products at Chaos. Previously, he served as the CEO and President of EvolveLba, which was acquired by Chaos in early 2025. I could have recorded this episode sooner and gotten Stephan or Bill, but I really wanted them both on the show at the same time to discuss the recent merger between Chaos and EvolveLba. Today, we go inside the merger. Stephan and Bill join me to talk about the synergies, innovations, and strategic rationale behind the union. We'll find out how and why these two companies are combining forces. We'll talk about tools from AI rendering with Veras to innovative tools like Glyph and Envision, change in the industry. And among the many fascinating topics that we covered, I want to focus a little bit more on complacency. It affects us all a little bit differently, some more than others, and my key takeaway from this episode is clear. You have to stay current with rapidly evolving technology and master its use. The AEC industry will look vastly different in 5 years. That's just my hot take. So you need to either get ahead of that change or at least keep up the pace at a bare minimum. What's exciting is that today's small teams can achieve extraordinary results, as EvolveLba has quite spectacularly shown us with what they've done in creating valuable tools. But it also applies to practitioners, of course. So stay tuned until the end, where I'll provide a summary of my thoughts. This was a great conversation with Stephan and Bill, and there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, as usual, so be sure to check those out. They're in your podcast app if you're a paid member, or if you're a free member, you can find them on the website at trxl.co. And now, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Stephan Sieber and Bill Allen. Bill, welcome back to the podcast on your part, Bill, and welcome for the first time, Stephan.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Evan.
It's always fun negotiating who's going to talk when there's multiple guests and we're all in remote locations. So I will do my best to actually point at one of you to make this happen. But Stephan, let's start with you because you're the new guest on the show, but also I think the news that we're kind of sharing today and also the conversation that we're going to have, I'm sure has a lot to do with you as the CEO at Chaos. And so maybe you can give us a bit of a background. We met at Autodesk University at the end of last year in San Diego, and I had gone into a small meeting booth with you and Christian, the former CEO of Chaos, and Phil Miller, who has been on one of my other shows, who is a 3D Studio Max guru, works at Chaos now, has been in the industry for a long time. And I was going in there thinking I was going to ask you guys some questions, but it was actually quite the opposite. I was told later by Roderick Bates, who has also been on the show, that you were given a dossier on me ahead of time. And you were asking me a bunch of questions because of the work that I do here on the podcast and the guests that I interview and just kind of my sense of what was going on in the industry. And so I'll just use that little story as a kickoff here, but it's great to have you. And if you want to jump in and tell us kind of your trajectory to becoming the CEO of Chaos, I would love to hear it.
Very happy to do that. Look, I came on board at Chaos on the very beginning of 2024, originally as the exec chairman. And then in summer last year, on the 1st of August, I took over as the CEO. I came on board after a long career in traditional B2B tech, so mainly enterprise applications. I've done a fair amount of ERP, enterprise resource planning. I've been the CEO of a digital freight platform. And when I got in touch with our board about this opportunity here at Chaos, I originally said, this is probably not the right opportunity for me because it's a new application space for me. And that's why we sort of chosen this way for me to get into the business as an exec chair, have an opportunity to work alongside Christian, my predecessor, really get to know the space, get to know the business. And I think we've realized that there's quite a few things in common, right? We serve professionals, we serve architects, we serve architecture firms, many smaller ones, but also quite a number of large architecture firms. And a lot of our go forward priority and strategy is about verticalizing our software for the AEC industry. And what I mean with verticalizing is really providing technology that helps our customers to create value for their customers. So as I say, help them to do faster design, smarter sales, better builds, to cover more parts of the design workflow beyond classic visualization. And hopefully this gives us a good segue into many interesting topics to touch on, amongst others, the combination of EvolveLab and Chaos.
All right, Bill, it's your turn. Welcome back to the show. I'll put a link to your previous episode, which was a very early episode on the podcast, in the show notes. And then I don't know, how do you describe what Ben does? Ben is like the Swiss Army knife of EvolveLab and now Chaos, right? And so he's been on the show. He's been on the Confluence show as well, talking about Veras and Glyph and all these different tools that you guys have been building. But give us kind of the quick update on your story, since, I mean, it's probably been 3 or 4 years since you've been on the show at this point. So tell us what's happened in the meantime.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And it could be a good segue to Ben's intro too. So I'll try to do him some justice here as well. So my background actually is not in software, not in consulting. Background's actually in architecture. So I worked for a lot of years doing traditional architecture practice, working on projects, etc. Naturally gravitated to the design technology side. Saw a lot of gaps in the industry and opportunities to try to help architects and engineers and contractors. So started EvolveLab in 2015 as a data-driven design and BIM consulting company. And then naturally saw an opportunity to start developing, solutions, apps for architects, engineers, and contractors, but I didn't know how to do that myself. I was not a programmer. I did some Dynamo scripting, some Grasshopper scripting, but never, legit C#, add-ins or anything like that. And so I needed someone, to kind of be a right-wing person to help me with that and, complement skills that I did not have. And so that was when I brought on Ben Guler, who was our CTO, and invited him to be a partner in EvolveLab. And we started building out, apps that we would have wanted when we were doing traditional architecture, which I'm sure we'll get into, automating construction documents and data-driven design and such. So anyways, we brought on Benji in 2019, realized he was a pretty special individual, I think, as all of us know, and crazy smart guy. And so anyways, since then, we started building out different products, and some of which I think were in the space, Evan, when I was on the show last time, but maybe some other ones that weren't, and probably some more advancements. And so we were trying to, touch different verticals throughout the architectural design process, whether it was, schematic design, all the way through construction documentation. So, I'd be happy to go down any one of those trails you want, but I'll let you.
So there was no word of this coming together at AU last year. I'm sure you guys were talking about it, though. I'm sure this has been kind of in the making for a while. And so nobody let on that this was going on. And so I was surprised, but also happy about it because, and I guess, Stephan, let's jump back to you here. A lot has happened with Chaos in the AEC space in the last couple of years, let's call it, from my awareness and my perception, in the press, but also just the show floor kind of experience that you guys create. You've released Envision. Now you've acquired EvolveLab and their Veras platform, among the other offerings that they have. You've done a big Enscape acquisition as Chaos and before your time, right? But this was another kind of big play into the AEC space more specifically. And so maybe you can just give us kind of an idea of why that's important to Chaos.
Well, it is important. So the way we look at the acquisition of Enscape was probably more of a merger, putting two companies together that had a lot of complementary aspects to each other. And already original Chaos, meaning before the merger with Enscape, had a big chunk of its business being done in ArcVis, architecture visualization. And for me, that's architecture as well, right? I understand that some of the techniques and some of the technology and some of the methods used are also used in other parts of visualization, such as VFX or even consumer products. But, when you think about the value chain, and again, It's a lot about for whom are we creating value, whose problem are we solving. Well, then, solving the problem of putting a physical structure into reality is a different problem that you're solving than entertaining people or than designing a car or launching a car. So there was already in Chaos before those acquisitions, that merger, a fair amount of AEC. And obviously with Enscape, which is 100% AEC, and now most recently also with, EvolveLab and some of the other organic innovations such as Envisions, etc. We're making more and more steps into the AEC space. Why is this important? Well, look, it's a large market. It's a market that we feel is still underserved with state-of-the-art technology compared to some other industries. It's a very fragmented market. There's a lot of, different technologies around. It's a lot of different players around. And it's a market that goes through profound change from multiple different angles, right? When we just look at what it means to build buildings today and what the requirements are and the cost that is involved, but also sustainability aspects, the role that architects play, the number of specialized jobs and roles that need to come together to realize such a project. So we feel there is a tremendous amount for better technology support, more modern technology support to help creative people, designers, architects in this industry to do their job better. And we feel that we can play a role in this.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think about from the firm side of things, because I'm an architect, I come from the practice side like Bill as well. And thinking about building tools versus buying tools is something that even architects deal with, and you're talking about it at a kind of a different scale, right? And filling gaps that you have as Chaos over time with these other technologies that other people have brought well beyond, just kind of a MVP level, right? Like these are proven pieces of software. Lots of architects are already using them. You're obviously doing a lot of internal development as well. You're doing some building and some buying. Can you kind of just talk about the difference of why you would pick one versus the other to fill these different holes, or what maybe it has to do with the expertise that already exists at Chaos and you really want to acquire the talent so that you can continue to build these things? Because I have to say it, right? There's a lot of people out there who are also concerned every time they see something like this happen, because many times products get bought and then killed, right? So maybe you could just talk about like the choice to build versus buy at your organizations.
Yeah, I think you touched on one of the most important points. It's skills and talent, right? Because if you think about a technology company, and that doesn't really matter what type of technology you talk about, it's, as I say, sometimes software is nothing but canned talent, right? It's basically creativity and experience and knowledge of individuals that we somehow, in the good old times, we burned it on a CD, and in the meantime, it's somewhere up in the cloud, right? But it's basically like corned beef. It's canned talent, right? And okay. And there's only so much you and your team, your staff knows, right? And let's also be clear. Chaos is a small company, right? I know that, we've grown and we're proud about our growth, but we're still a company with in total roughly 750 employees compared to some of the other, larger players in the technology industry. We're a small company. We're also a very focused company, right? It's more than 80% of our business of our core business that is in AEC, that is around architecture, right? So we are quite focused, even though we play on a global scale. We serve customers of many different, segments, like from very small, even freelancer, up to fairly large enterprises. But we're quite a focused business. So I think that gives us an opportunity to be very specific on, where we have a chance to excel and accelerate with the knowledge, the talent, the resources, the experience we have, the technology that we own and that we understand, and where it is easier and faster for us to partner. And as I say, an acquisition is nothing but a very, very deep and sort of never-ending form of a partnership, right? That's the way I look at this. So this acquisition of EvolveLab, and that's why I personally rather talk about bringing the companies together or merging them, because Bill and Ben and their team and EvolveLab, and the technology and the customers and the experience and the talent that is in there. This is not about us swallowing them. This is about us coming together because we're ultimately convinced that we can do something together that each of us couldn't do as easy and as fast as we can do together.
Let's take a quick break from the conversation to tell you about AVAIL. Is your team struggling to find the BIM assets they need? AVAIL's content management system simplifies access to all of your firm's content in one easy-to-use platform. No matter where your files live or what type of files they are, you can easily search and access them from AVAIL. Now, designers can consistently find and reuse all types of content. So what does that mean? Well, standards-compliant models and drawings are easier to create. The documentation process is less chaotic. New hires are easier to onboard. Projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. You get the idea. Visit getavail.com to try AVAIL for free and request a free demo. That's getavail.com, GETAVAIL.com. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now let's get back to the conversation. So Bill, you're nodding vigorously, I might add, for those who can't see this, who are listening. So Bill, I mean, when it comes to coming together with Chaos, tell the audience what that means for, I mean, if Stephan says Chaos is a small company, let's talk about EvolveLab. Yep. So you could talk about that, like just when they approach you or you approach them. I don't know how it happened, but like obviously there was a lot of kind of feeling that out that you went through to kind of really feel like if it was the right thing or not. But to Stephan's point, right, it's like adding fuel in resources wise to what EvolveLab could do. I mean, that had to also be really enticing to see that you could make maybe a larger impact in the industry.
100%. Yeah, that's what it was. So for a lot of people that are thinking about starting their own company, I'd like to say it's a very romanticized idea that you have in your head. And then, when the boots hit the ground or the tire hits the road, there's a lot of just grunt work that you have to start coordinating. There's payroll and proposals and HR and handbooks and all of this kind of stuff. And what I started to realize is, you kind of as a business owner or founder, you get sucked into a lot of those kinds of things and supporting your team and making sure that they're, taken care of. And then your team kind of gets to work on the fun stuff, which is great. But for us specifically, we didn't raise money. We're 100% bootstrapped company. And so basically all of our R&D came from our services revenue. We reinvested that services revenue into the products that we developed. And so we kind of saw this opportunity with Chaos, twofold. Is one, it selfishly was an opportunity for me to get back to the craft and the things that I love. And then we can, there's people at Chaos that are, it's their job to coordinate HR and payroll, and it's great. They can do that. But then, for the end users and for our customers and for everyone else, the opportunity is that we get to now really amplify, the technology. We're working on some really fun and what we think, is very innovative processes, but there's a cap to, gasoline in the tank and the amount of resources that we had prior to the acquisition. Again, with us being 100% bootstrap. So what we saw as an opportunity with Chaos is really to start amplifying that innovation and then also getting the technology into end users' hands. More people, would be able to be aware of the technology, be able to benefit from the technology. And so it's really, that's how I kind of saw the opportunity, both from a selfish standpoint, but also for the industry as well. And so that's where we see some really great synergy. Stephan and I talked a lot, prior to this, and this idea of 1 + 1 = 3. It's not just, you take the two things; they're better together. And so that's where we really see an opportunity to really take things to the next level now with both the kind of what we're been building, but also with the resources of Chaos.
Can you talk about kind of what the right word is here, but the idea that I mean, you picked a partner.
Yeah.
And I'm curious why you maybe there were other options, maybe there weren't on the table, but there's definitely like the players in our industry. I'm curious why you felt like this was the right fit for you guys, and maybe even why now.
Yeah, I'd be happy. So we were never, really looking to sell. Like we never went to some brokerage company and put ourselves on. We always had, it was crazy. We've always had people that have approached us, but never really seemed like the right fit. And so the main thing that was really important to us was two things. Was one, the synergy, which I was just describing a second ago, but then also the culture. And so from the moment we met Stephan and his team, Ivor and Roderick and the whole group, Vlado, everyone has just been amazing to work with. There's this very natural chemistry, almost like when you're dating your spouse and you're trying to find a partner. It's very much like that because, as Stephan mentioned, like it's a long-term relationship. You're getting married to somebody. And so you want to make sure it's a good fit. And from the moment we talked to them, it was just this natural chemistry that occurred. And so the relationship was very important to us, in addition to, the synergy, because you want to make sure post, acquisition and all of that you're going to, get along and everyone's going to play well. And yes, you have friction with any relationship we have with our partners or friends or anything. But, the chemistry there helps you get over that. And so we saw a very natural fit there in talking to them, and we really liked them a lot. They're very likable people, the whole team. And I can't tell you, like when we joined, like I got so many LinkedIn messages and email, welcome to the team. We're so excited you're here. So it just kind of further validated that after we came on board as well. So that was just important to us, in addition to the synergy piece.
Well, Stephan, let's go back to you and just talk about what was really enticing about what EvolveLab is doing, continues to do, and where you see that going in the future.
I can echo many things that Bill has just mentioned, right? Equally for us as the acquirer or as the other partner in this marriage, the culture and the personal fit matters, right? Because as I said before, there is a fair percentage of this investment is really bringing talent and bringing creativity and experience into our team. The second strong pillar is really that what I call the strategic rationale. When you look at what EvolveLab does across I'd say the four larger products, right? Veras certainly being the most popular one, but then also Glyph, Morphis, Helix, and then you sort of put them into a logical value chain, simplified value chain of how architects and the AEC industry work, then I think everybody can see that we're very adjacent to each other, but there's actually that's a positive thing. There is little overlap, right? We're really extending each other's capabilities, and that's why this strategic rationale was like from the initial view already quite attractive and sort of very very logically explained why one and one in this case can really be three. Then we talked to a lot of customers. We talked to a lot of EvolveLab customers. We talked to a lot of our customers. We talked to industry experts, and that visit in San Diego. And I think it's fair to say, Bill, yes, we were talking indeed. Actually, I think even the hour before or right after our conversation in the very same romantic booth, I had a meeting with Bill and Ben.
I wouldn't call it that.
Did you have candles in your booth, Evan?
We didn't have candles.
Oh, okay.
I had a bottle of water.
So we had a meeting, and I think that was the first time we met in person, right? We did talk on the phone and video conference before, but we spent a lot of time really figuring out like how would we do this together? How would we do this in a way that this is not becoming one of those stories where big swallows small and small disappears and evaporates, but this is really something where customers and our existing users, right? Let's be down to the individual, the people who use our technology every day, day in, day out in fulfilling their mission, where they see a value and where they can get excited about this, right? And And through these discussions, we just realized that there is a lot of common beliefs and a lot of common convictions and a lot of common frustrations with how things should work and could work if we would have more talent and more resources and more capacity. And then we felt, look, this is still a challenge. It's still a big opportunity, and you don't get it for free. There is a lot of work going into this, and that will continue. But we ultimately came to the point where I think we all felt it's easier for us to do this together, and it will still be fun. And that's why I think we then came to the point where we started to talk about commercials and terms and conditions and everything, which is obviously this is an important project for all of us, and it has its place. But I'm a firm believer that if you have culture and a strong strategic rationale, you have a fair chance to overcome the legal groundwork and the commercials. If you only have legal groundwork and commercials, but the culture and the strategic rationale are not strong enough, then it will, or it can easily be one of those cases that, people probably point out in MBA case studies about M&A projects that didn't work out, right?
Can you define commercials? I've never heard that term in this context before.
Price, right?
Okay.
When you acquire a company, you need to pay money for it. You don't get it for free, unfortunately,
Gotcha.
right?
So it's based on the word commerce. I get it now.
Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
Because commercial in the U.S. is I'm watching. It's getting in the way of my television show that I'm watching or whatever.
And
right. So
forgive,
thank you for explaining.
That's probably my non-native abuse of your language.
No worries. Okay, so I want to share a quick story here because I think this kind of speaks to the culture that I've experienced with both of your companies, and it has to do with even just at the last AU. And I'm in a privileged position to be able to tell this story that when I go to the Chaos booth, Roderick and Dan Monahan are there to kind of say, hey, come back here. I want to show you some stuff, right? And the way that your two companies do it is different, right? I think with Chaos, it's more of a we've already thought of this slideshow. Here's what we're going to show you, and Dan usually is the one leading that, and Roderick is sitting there, and they're both asking questions. What do you think about that? What do you think about? Is this useful? Whatever. But I like the whole come. I want to show you something, and then I go to the EvolveLab booth, right? And you talked about Ben Guler earlier, and Ben's like, hey, come over here. I want to show you this. I want to get your thoughts on this, or I want to show you what's coming, or whatever it is. And so, like I said, it's a bit of a privileged position to be in, but at the same time, you're both doing it. And you're both doing it because you want to get a genuine reaction of somebody who's in the industry, because you're excited about the tools you're building. You're wondering if you're going the right direction, right? It's like, is this right? Is this, what do you think? What's your sense about this? And that's valuable because there's a lot of companies out there who never ask, right? And they just throw something out there. And we all know who the kinds of companies that I'm talking about right now, but it's like the big reveal, and it's like, well, I would have, as a practitioner, I would have maybe done that differently. And so there's less involvement, I will say, with the industry of the decision-making process when tools are being developed before releasing them. So I wanted to share that because it really does speak to kind of this fit in culture. You guys are both doing it, and you're going to continue to do it like that, I assume, because that's how you operate. And to me, as a partner in the industry with the industry itself, I think that there's some reassurance there for the audience, but also, your customers, that really is a fit. I'm curious now, Bill and Stephan, moving forward, EvolveLab developed tools that I don't think we would have ever seen come from Chaos, right? I'm thinking of Glyph and, really deep kind of automation type stuff that happens inside larger platforms that aren't your, right? These are tools built to plug into, not unlike the visualization stuff, but not like it either. So I'm just curious from a product standpoint, right? Bill, what's your new title at Chaos?
Director of Products, I think, is my title.
Yeah. So I mean, you're now in the position of making decisions about the kinds of products that Chaos puts out into the world. And you've already made those decisions earlier with EvolveLab, with the types of tools that you're putting out into the world. I'm wondering if that changes, but I'm also wondering, like, you talked earlier, Stephan, about verticalization, but there's also kind of a horizontalization going on within the AEC industry itself of offering a wider range of tools now through acquisition, but also through development. And so I'm going to throw this to both of you. You guys can arm wrestle virtually about who's going to go first, but like, what's the thinking behind this and this side of the story?
Basically, a lot of the tools that we build at EvolveLab are tools that we would have wanted, as mentioned. So we have an assumption because we've been in practice and we see a lot of the, ditches and the very fragmented process that Stephan, had mentioned earlier in the industry. And so I think both of us kind of see the world the same way. Some people look at a problem and they go, well, that sucks, and they move on with their life. We kind of look at a problem and we go, man, it'd be cool if, someone created an interoperability tool for this issue, or if there was some way to, automate construction documents. And so we try to build out those tools. But, it's also a very small industry, and you also want, feedback, as you mentioned, and trying to get that validation. And so that's kind of how we look through the lens, through our worldview and in the industry at large. And then regarding, the integration, that 1 + 1 = 3 with Chaos, I would let Stephan, comment on this and validate this. But as we've gotten more acclimated with the Chaos team, we understand that that's part of the bigger vision. Chaos has been known, for a very long time to be the experts, the leaders in visualization. But also realizes there's great opportunity for all these different, lanes within the project process and life cycle, not just visualization, but there's other problems that also we should be trying to solve. And so I think that's where that synergy, both of us kind of saw that. But Stephan, I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, so happy to. Before I answer that, I'd like to say thank you, Evan, for that feedback. This is, for me as the CEO of this company, and I think as I'm speaking for many of us or for all of us, that I very much like to hear this, right? This is great. That's how a technology company should work with its customers, right? Be curious, be passionate, and be never stopping to ask questions and try to understand how we can create more value for the people we serve, right? Yeah. And that's why, and the second part of my answer I want to give is that vertical versus horizontal, right? When I talk about vertical software, I'm talking about industry-specific software that supports the core people, the core functions in an architecture firm, AEC firm in our case, right? As compared to horizontal software which is important technology like a payroll, an HR, human resources system, which is just not the core process of an AEC company, right? Now, if you play in that vertical space, then it comes with a few opportunities, but it also comes with a few obligations, right? The opportunity is you work with people like you that actually deliver products to customers, services and products to customers, and that depend in their success to the support you provide to them, you as a technology vendor provide to them. That's a great opportunity because you can actually be contributing and be part of their success. Obviously, it comes with an obligation. If you don't do a good job, if you deliver something that they can't use, well, you make them unsuccessful, and ultimately you lose them as a customer, or you don't win them as a customer, right? So I think it sets up imperative for marketability, for usability, for value creation that comes with vertical software that I personally enjoy, right? And when I say we want to move more to vertical, then we want to be more helpful in helping architects specifically to deliver their results, to achieve their goals. Because, and yes, Chaos originally started with visualization, or even more narrow with rendering, right? But most of our customers don't render for the sake of rendering. They render because it helps them to sell their ideas, to express their ideas, and it helps them to win more projects, to explain better why they are unique, to understand better what their customers are expecting, to help people in engineering and construction to understand better, can this be built and how can it be built? And if you zoom out and say visualization for the sake of visualization, or visualization for the sake of, as I said, faster design, smarter sales, better builds, well, then you can automatically see how the EvolveLab tools, even though they are not core in classic visualization, in my opinion, fit very well into what our mission and mandate for the AEC industry is. Because it's all about giving architects better tools, better technology to achieve their goals faster and be more successful, and take away as much of the lower added value, mundane, repetitive tasks that I think all of them spend still far too much time with, taking this away from them, using modern technology to eliminate or to reduce that the effort and time spent there, and giving them even more chances to spend time and their energy and creativity where they really can make a difference, right?
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company AVAIL, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. I think one of the themes that I've seen become really apparent in what Chaos is doing specifically, and there's others as well, but is this idea, and I've talked about it with Roderick on the show, so this isn't a new thing maybe for the audience to hear, but this idea of what used to be, I mean, you said it well, right? We don't do renderings for the sake of doing renderings. Like usually there's a sales component, there's a decision-making component associated with those to help move the project forward. Back in the day, right, so dating myself, it was always like, can we get updated renderings? Clients were always asking for updated renderings, and it was like, no, you can't. Like, they're so time-consuming. You only get them per the contract. And now with tools like Enscape and Veras, it's very much like, you can have renderings whenever you want. Like, renderings are free, basically. And that's a good thing for clients because it keeps them in the loop. It keeps them happy and satisfied that things are progressing and that they can see it in a language they can understand. That speaks back to this kind of sales idea of rendering. But that you're actually pulling these tools into the process earlier and more often so that they can be used for decision making. So that's the concept I mentioned a minute ago about. It's maybe not new to the audience of this show, but that's a super, super, super important aspect of how tools can change over time. And I think there's still a lot of architects and probably small firms out there, which is the majority of firms that we can't forget about, that don't understand that yet, right? They are like, no, I still do renderings at the end of a process, or the view in SketchUp is all my client's ever going to get, right? Just the shaded geometry view. So I think that, and then you're able to expand on that, right, with your sustainability tools that you've been showing off, right? So it's like, okay, now we can use this really smart information in the model to help drive the decision-making process in a way that we can see it, right? Like literally see it, because there's a visualization component that's helping us make these decisions as we go along. But that helps us make better decisions earlier in a project, which really drive project success. Instead of waiting until the end of DD to get an energy model back from our MEP engineers, like, we're front loading that process and having a better understanding of our decisions earlier and the impacts that those have on the project, which is the ultimate thing that we're delivering to our client. It also allows us to include them in that process because we get that feedback so much earlier. that we can have these conversations and include them. And that actually is much better for that relationship that the architect is building with their client over time too, right? That inclusiveness in the process. It's not so black box. It's like, we're going to go over here in the studio. We're going to work. No, you can't come in and look. It's too messy and you'll just ask too many questions. No, now it's way more back and forth, way more often. The touch points in the iterative process are there's so many more of, the potential at least is there to do that. So I'm just curious from your standpoint how you see that in, manifesting in the tools that you're putting out there.
I'll go first, Bill, this time, and then you chime in. But I think it's also important for us to remember it's not only architect and client, right? It's like dozens, if not hundreds of people and specialized tasks and profiles that collaborate. I was about 3 years ago, a bit longer, 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting on the opposite side of the table. I was a customer. In my previous company, we built a large new office building. We were the biggest tenant in the building, and we were part of the construction process. And I, as a non-architect, I was confronted in many meetings looking at 2D plans, very abstract plans on sort of a flight level of 1.50 meters, cut through the building, trying to understand how should our people work in this building? How do we? That was just in the middle of the Corona pandemic, right, where we also needed to rethink the way we put the workspaces, the way we organized ourselves, where we moved from very traditional, everybody has its own desk, to a more open space. And it was so hard for me to understand, like, is this going to be a workspace that our people will enjoy? It will help us to drive productivity and will help us to bring teams together, etc. If I would have had something like what we can provide to our customers, even together with EvolveLab, where you put on a virtual reality glasses, or even you look on your cell phone or on a computer screen, and then you iterate, you document, you annotate, you collaborate in one platform on something like photorealistic visuals, right? They don't need to be absolutely photorealistic for some of the use cases. For some they need to be, but for some others they don't. But you have something that you as a non-expert understand what it means and how it looks like and how it will work in reality. That's a huge benefit, and that's sort of next to covering more steps in the workflow from concept to construction, where I think we have an opportunity to also somehow become a collaboration platform for multiple different jobs and profiles and players along that chain, to communicate and to exchange data and feedback and iterate, because it's not a one-way street, right?
One of the things that's pretty interesting with some of the tools and the technologies, Evan, you mentioned like how long it used to take to create a rendering. I remember, you probably remember this too, back in the day, we would network all these computers together, and then you'd hit render, go home for the evening, and hope and pray that when you come in the morning, your rendering, would work. And then, with the advent of tools like Inkscape, you now have this real-time rendering engine. It's like, are you serious? This is incredible. And then with AI, it just further accelerates, some of this instantaneous feedback that you start to get, and you're able to actually produce this, very, very fast to be able to get it in front of a client. So it's really, shortcutting the process quite a bit, and just helping things, be more and more efficient for sure.
Bill, I'm curious from your point of view, developing a tool like Veras. I mean, something that I've observed in the industry is, obviously AI is taking over a lot of the airwaves, let's just say, right? It's thrown in our face every single day as like this really incredible intelligence. And I think there's still not a lot of intelligence there. But back to the idea that I mentioned earlier about decision making, architects have always done this kind of a thing, but they didn't have control over. They were on a search rather than prompting image making, right? And so this idea of ideating early through the rendering process, I mean, it's kind of not even rendering, right? It's like you type something in and you get something back, and so it's still kind of a search. And I think maybe it's still. We could link it to searching for inspiration, searching for ideas to help drive the design process. Instead of thinking of rendering as the outcome or even the process with real-time rendering, which it became, now it's like ideating and coming up with ideas or looking for direction. And that's a behavior shift that I've noticed happen, with other AI generating tools as well as like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, things like that are maybe more black box and not as directly related to architecture as Veras is. But could you maybe just talk about the shifts that you've seen? And it doesn't just have to be with image making and looking for design ideas, right? But that to me is a big, like, we're not looking through Dwell magazine anymore, right? We're actually iterating in a tool with maybe some really rudimentary geometry, and it's coming back with things that are like, whoa, I never would have thought of that. That's a shift in the industry. That's actually changing things.
Yeah, 100%. I'm thinking through, our process. What we used to do when we started to go through that, Evan, as you're talking about, is, we go to Pinterest and create mood boards and Google images,
Right.
and we kind of put all these on, a board to kind of look at and get inspiration, and then we'd bring it back to our design model authoring program. It really is a shift, like a very disruptive, in a good way, shift in the way that we execute and do our day-to-day work. I'll be very honest, I didn't understand the application or the opportunities that were around AI. The technology was so foreign and weird to me when I first saw it. I remember actually the first time Ben showed me Veras, and he put a calendar invite on my calendar, and it was called The Future. And I was like, okay, this very kind of, abstract subject. And he goes, I want to show you something. I said, okay. And he started showing me Veras inside of Revit. And it was the Revit, sample model. And then you had this screen on top, and it changed the model slightly. And I was like, what are you showing me? What is this? And he goes, Bill, it's AI. It's the future. It's going to change the way we work. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, how? Like, what is this doing? And it took me a little while to connect the dots. But then as an end user, I started realizing the opportunity. When you're talking about this ideation process, Evan, I remember I was a computational guy. I would use tools like Grasshopper, to create. That was the fastest way I knew. I would build something dynamically, something parametric. So I didn't have to just model it once and scrap that and model it again. I would model it dynamically so I could iterate, for that process and try to do it as fast as possible. With the advent of AI, I had this aha moment where I was like, wait a second, I don't have to model this entire storefront and all of these mullions and this perforated panel. I could prompt it, and you talked about Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and some of these tools. One of the cool things, just to brag on Veras a bit, is that it's pretty cool that it uses your project as a substrate. So that's the other differentiator. And
Right.
So it wasn't just, a mood board or some Google image. To your point, you can now actually use your actual project with the context and the backgrounds and the floor-to-floor heights, and then you could prompt and get, a different result. And so that was kind of the big aha moment for me, as a fundamental way in how we work and how advantageous it was. So it was really, really special in a new process. And you mentioned kind of people being scared of AI. I mean, I could understand that. I respect that. But, one of the things that as I've started, because I'm an end user, I told you I'm not a programmer, I'm an end user first and foremost. And it's a really fun tool. Like, actually, I was surprised at how much I like it and enjoy it. And there's this quote I use quite a bit when people talk about AI and how scary it is. And it says that, AI isn't going to take your job, but someone using AI might. And so with that, when we went to, as a parallel, an anecdotal example, when we go to Revit, and Revit came out and you drop in an elevation marker and it elevates your building, architects aren't going, wait a sec, Revit's taking my job. Like, I wanted to draw, that whole elevation.
Thank God.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. And so AI is kind of that, it's a co-pilot. It's a way to kind of with you, and you're still in the driver's seat 100%. And it is very fun, and there's gradations of how you use it. We have a little geometry override slider, so you can, if you want the AI to have more creative freedom, or you want more, freedom in that, you have that option. And so that's kind of how I look, through the lens, but also a very fundamental way in the way we work. It is changing very fast. But hopefully it gives us that quality of life back, and be able to have fun in the day-to-day work.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to tell you about something that I think is pretty great and you might be interested in it. And that is my exclusive newsletter available only to paid members of Troxel Plus that I call Leadership Edge. If you're looking to stay ahead of the curve in architecture and technology, Leadership Edge delivers insights that you won't find anywhere else. Why? Well, because they are my deep dives into the podcast conversations, just like the one that you're listening to in this episode, to give you an edge on the industry. Each edition of the newsletter provides key insights for forward-thinking leaders seeking innovation in AEC who are short on time, who isn't, offering the context of each conversation without the need to listen to the full episode. I've actually designed them, though, to keep you updated, spark your interest, and encourage you to tune into the full episodes if those ideas resonate. And the best part is that they are packed with actionable takeaways to help you navigate the future of practice. By becoming a paid supporter, you get Leadership Edge delivered right to your inbox, and it's a direct way to support my podcast while getting exclusive, valuable content to sharpen your leadership mindset. You can join today at trxl.co and start receiving my Leadership Edge newsletters. Just click the subscribe button either in the upper right-hand corner or at the bottom of the page, or you can visit the link that I put in the show notes. Thanks. Now back to the conversation. I like that, being able to have fun. I'm not looking forward to the day, though, Bill, where I move that slider over to say, like, no, respect my geometry, and it moves it back to giving itself creative freedom.
Exactly, right? That's, by the way, something that we are actually discussing quite a bit, is like, to what extent do we want to give, and we think it is important, do we want to give human beings, our users, our customers, an opportunity to control and to understand what the AI algorithm has done, because we think that controllability and that specificity is absolutely critical, right? And if you look at this, as a non-architect, but I'm comparing this with many other parts of our lives, right? Even the lives of my kids as students is changing, right? And I remember when the LLMs, the first large language models came up, my initial reaction was like, don't use them, right? Don't. Okay, you need to learn by heart. You need to read those books and remember for the rest of your lives. And at some point in time, luckily quite fast, I have to say, I realized, like, it's completely wrong. It's just their role is changing, right? And I think architects are more like probably curators and editors of AI-assisted iterations, whereas originally they were the sole and the only creator. And that gives them an opportunity to strike that balance between genuine creativity and uniqueness and control and specificity, while getting the support from modern technology to deliver better, smarter results in hopefully a more fun way, right?
Well, I'm curious, Stephan, how is this going to manifest further in Chaos's products? Is there anything you can talk about with kind of the use of AI and what you're pursuing?
Yeah, so at the moment, the focus is a lot on Veras and bringing Enscape and Veras closer together. And I'd say on both ends, right? Use Veras very early in the ideation, conceptual, schematic phase, and then use it sort of at the back end or along the design process to iterate and to get faster results and ideas and inspiration. But as I said before, right, equally Glyph, Morphis, Helix are great additions to elements we do, right? For example, in Enscape, I think it was 4.1. Don't quote me on it. Well, I did quote myself already, but I think it was 4.1 where we brought something like the Revit filter overlays, right, where we basically can visualize all the important information that sits in a Revit model, and that is of utmost importance in understanding how a building works, and for example, how flexible it will be for multiple different use cases in the future, right? And those are elements that connect very closely to elements that come with Glyph around documentation, with Helix, and some of the other capabilities that the EvolveLab team brings to us, right? So we're step by step bringing this together into a suite for AEC products that hopefully, as I said before, go from concept to construction, using the power of, I try to use that term, analytical visualization, that is not only about making things look nice, but also helping people to understand how they work and how difficult they are to realize and how efficient they are in terms of sustainability and what options you have to improve energy, building performance and energy efficiency and things like that, right?
There's definitely like this kind of image making creative process that's going on with a tool like Veras, and then for the control enthusiasts in the room, architects in general, right? It's like we really want to control the exact geometry, the exact materials, maybe not the lighting, maybe not the mood, which is something that Veras is really good at, because that stuff is harder than it looks to achieve, right? It's creating kind of this feeling that an image can evoke, or that an animation can evoke. I don't like to use the word control freak. I like to use the word control enthusiast around here, because when we're building our buildings, our models of our buildings, and showing them to our client, a lot of times they're going to get stuck on, because we're at the mercy of like, okay, if I don't know how to build a texture, I got to go find it. I got to find it online. And then I got to make it tile and repeat and make it look good. Or else the client's going to see that and be like, they're going to talk about the way that the material looks and it isn't quite right. And it's like, well, that's not what we're even talking about here. We're talking about the overall form of the building, or we're trying to. And so it gives us the ability to go in and say, with the help of these incredible tools, to say, okay, make a material that looks like what I have imagined in my mind, what is really hard to find, and to build myself manually. That process is pretty painstaking, right? So maybe, Bill, you can talk about this a little bit, like how far Veras has come even in the last year with regional rendering and being able to basically swap out materials with the new prompt in certain images. It is giving us more and more control all the time.
Totally. Yeah. A quick comment on just the kind of the concept and, clients responding. We hear that a lot when we create renderings and you show a client something and they're like, wait, I didn't say I wanted red brick. Well, don't pay attention to that. It's just,
they can't not
they
see
can't
it.
not. Yeah. And so one of the cool workflows I saw with Veras, so a lot of people do sketch to rendering, right? You could take a pencil sketch, you could upload it to a web version of Veras. You could do a render and make it photorealistic, which is pretty cool. But the inverse of that is kind of interesting.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Just to put a label on it.
Yeah. But if you want to do the inverse of this, imagine you have a fully detailed BIM, a model, you have all your mullions modeled, you have materials even applied, and it looks like it's complete. You could also take that exact same building, a 3D BIM, and you could upload it to Veras, and you could prompt white box, pencil sketch, watercolor, painting, and then it looks conceptual. And so that's kind of interesting, kind of an interesting workflow to do the opposite. And, from a workflow to show that to a client or a customer. Regarding some of the other things we're working on, the other question you had. So one of the things we've added to Veras, and we just released a 2.0 version, is now a 3D viewer. And so that 3D viewer sets up for a lot of things that we're working on, including, view persistency and better geometry retention. Some of the feedback we've heard from customers is like, yeah, Veras is great for ideation, but what if I want, I don't want it to change my model? The 3D viewer helps us with that geometry retention piece. You mentioned like the selection. We now have like a save selection, think very much like Photoshop, where you can select certain things and then save that selection. We also built out a bunch of cool presets. So one of the things we're trying to do is get to this, what we call the aha moment. Ben calls it the aha moment. You got to get to that as soon as possible, where someone can just open your tool and hit 2 clicks and get to it. So we have all these presets, whether, you want to do photorealistic or, pencil sketch, interior rendering, and you hit render and you get that. And so there's this term being thrown around in our industry and other industries called prompt engineering. Now you have to be a prompt engineer, to use AI. And so the presets kind of, we always talk at EvolveLab about reducing the friction, the friction that occurs in a process. And so some of the presets now help you with that. And you can create your own presets. You can save those. So if there's prompts that you use a lot, certain settings you use a lot for your geometry override or your material override, your negative prompts, all that now can be saved as a preset. And then we're working on sharing those presets. So if you have like an office and you want to share those with others, you can do that as well. Those are some of the things on the Veras side. I can't remember the last time we talked on the Glyph side. We added a AI component of that, Glyph Copilot, we're calling it. And so before you could, create tasks and bundles to automate construction documents, view creation, dimensioning, tagging, sheet creation, sheet packing, all that good stuff. But now you can use Glyph Copilot and you can prompt and use an LLM like Stephan was talking about. And you could say, hey, Glyph, dimension all my interior walls on levels 1 through 16. And then the AI goes through and, dimensions all of those walls for you. Something I didn't expect is there's a very practical use case for that. We all talk about, user experience and let's just use the Revit stair tool, for example. There's all these like tables within tables within tables that just make for a bad user experience sometimes. And we kind of have that on the Glyph side, this challenge of all these settings. Well, what if you could just like prompt and then mitigate all these, tabs and, settings and be able to just tell it what you want. And then it would be able to apply that. So that it's interesting. Some of these AI components can also help with like UI, UX as well. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
To help, again, reduce the friction on that. So that's some of the things we've been working on since the last time we chatted on some of those features.
Stephan, as far as Chaos goes, I mentioned earlier that you guys released Envision, which is kind of what it expands the ability for an architect, I think, to tell a story, right? Which is really cool. Do you want to expand on that and kind of talk about a little bit what Chaos has done in the last year to 6 months?
Yeah. So I think you mentioned a few elements already. Like Envision, we launched Envision. It's still in beta right now. It will be fully available in early May, which is sort of the storytelling tool, right? Some people don't like when I say that analogy, but since you described it that way, and I think it describes very well what it does, it gives architects an opportunity to tell a design story, to animate, to bring in different angles, to assemble large scenes from multiple different systems. I think that is one of the. I'm not saying we're the only company, but it's definitely something we do believe in, that data needs to flow. We need to have an opportunity to aggregate data from different sources and to play it back if needed into different sources. So it cannot be a one-way sort of dead-end street. But especially when you assemble larger scenes that you bring together from different sources. And it obviously has, for the Enscape users, it has a higher quality, right? It uses the Lavina rendering engine, which is a real-time path tracer, ray tracer. So it really delivers in real time, like probably the highest quality that you can imagine. And that's pretty exciting, right? I think it addresses a lot of the customer feedback we get from very advanced and very passionate Enscape users on things they want to do on top of what Enscape can offer. But it also addresses a specific own need, right? The other thing you've mentioned already is Enscape Impact, which is sort of the building performance, energy efficiency tool. I think Enscape Impact is going to be, it's more of an overarching term and title that we will use for multiple modules. So energy efficiency is only the first module. Is a few more coming, like natural light and artificial light analysis, etc. So where we again move towards that, making this a collaboration platform for multiple specialized tasks that need to happen and that happen along the design process. The third area I probably want to mention is the asset library, the Cosmos library, where we on the one side continue to build standard assets and just provide a lot more content to creative people that they can use and they can put in their scenes. But two things that I'm quite excited about is the crowd simulation and the traffic simulation that we have through also an acquisition, AXYZ, Anima, the Anima acquisition of Axis from about 3 years ago, probably. Chaos acquired the company, which gives us not only human beings and animals, but also moving human beings and animals, and in the meantime also vehicles and traffic simulation. So it's all going in that direction of making this a very comprehensive hub for design people, creative people, helping them to accelerate their design process.
It's interesting that you've gotten a reaction in the negative about using the term storytelling. I'm curious what that means, because that is precisely how I think about it as a designer and which is basically a communicator and a salesman. And again, I think people also react negatively to the idea of selling design, but that convincing, call it whatever you want, getting people on the same page, consensus, moving forward, like that is selling. And they're relying on your expertise as an architect to lead the way in doing that. And I really do see it as storytelling and sales through communication, right? Like these tools are all made for us to be able to communicate what's going on and what we've synthesized to another audience, whether that's the owner or the contractor or the jurisdiction that has to approve the plans, whatever it is, like it's all communication.
Yeah, while I wholeheartedly agree, I think that's probably exactly the point why there was some reactions on that. I think it's absolutely straight to the point, right? We want to help architects to sell, explain their ideas better, to help them articulate the genuinity of their creativity, of their ideas, and I think that's absolutely the point. Yeah, so
I think that's a great spot to call this conversation right there, because I think you just pulled it all together in that last statement about helping architects accomplish their goals. And I appreciate you both for coming on the show. I'm going to put links to everything that we talked about in the show notes for this, including some links for the audience to connect with the guests on LinkedIn so they can see what's going on with your companies and the latest news. It's great to be able to have those connections with industry folks and build that network and make it stronger. And I appreciate you guys coming on the show today and sharing this new partnership / acquisition / merger, however you want to frame it. I think it does sound like it overall a really great thing for our industry in AEC. I know Chaos is definitely in other industries as well, but I really appreciate the focus that I've seen and the momentum that I see in this industry. And so thanks for coming on the show today to share.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
All right, before you take off, in the introduction to this episode, I said something that I believe deserves repeating here. The AEC industry will look vastly different in 5 years. And if you want to remain relevant, whether you're a sole practitioner, part of a large firm, or running your own startup, you can't afford to be complacent. Now, let's be honest, we're all complacent in some way. It just shows up differently for each of us. Maybe it's avoiding new tools because they seem overwhelming. Maybe it's sticking with inefficient workflows. Maybe they don't seem inefficient, but maybe they are. But the familiarity is there, right? Or maybe it's assuming your current skills will always be enough. This episode is a powerful reminder that staying current, and even better, getting ahead, isn't just a nice to have anymore. It's essential. And to drive that point home, I want to walk through 7 key insights from my conversation with Stephan and Bill that really illustrate what's at stake and what's possible when we lean into change. Let's use these 7 points as a mirror and a motivation to reflect on where we each might need to take a more proactive approach. Number 1, EvolveLab bootstrapped innovation as a small team. Bill shared how EvolveLab was a 100% bootstrapped company and still managed to develop impactful tools like Veras, Glyph, Helix, and Morpheus without external funding. He said, all of our R&D came from our services revenue. We reinvested that, and now we get to amplify that innovation. This proves small teams can achieve outsized impact when they embrace emerging tools and stay nimble. Number 2, the danger of falling behind. Stephan highlighted that AEC is still underserved with state-of-the-art technology compared to some other industries. Chaos is specifically investing in this vertical because they recognize the need and the opportunity to monetize. Number 3, you must build or buy to keep up. Stephan discussed Chaos's strategy of both developing tools internally and acquiring innovation from companies like EvolveLab to accelerate with the knowledge, the talent, the resources, the experience that we have. He frames software as canned talent, reinforcing that success depends on capturing and applying the best ideas quickly. Number 4, AI is shifting how we work rapidly. Bill described how his initial skepticism of AI turned into excitement once he saw how Veras could ideate from models directly within Revit. He said, it's changing very fast, but hopefully it gives us that quality of life back and allows us to have fun in the day-to-day work. Number 5, new tools enable a whole new design process. Instead of just rendering, architects can now ideate visually and quickly with AI, changing their relationship with design tools. This is a fundamental shift in how we do day-to-day work, and it's happening fast. Are you shoehorning new tools into an existing design process, or are you reimagining the process? There's a big difference. Number 6, industry leadership demands involvement. In this episode, I called out how both Chaos and EvolveLab actively seek feedback from practitioners during tool development, unlike many companies that operate in a silo. And finally, number 7, the stakes are higher than ever. Stephan emphasized that architects need better tools to achieve their goals faster, to spend more time and creativity where they can really make a difference. If practitioners don't adopt new methods, they risk being stuck doing repetitive, mundane tasks that AI and automation can now help eliminate. And we all know where continuing to do mundane tasks leads. So those are my thoughts. Tell me what you think by clicking the feedback link in the show notes or leave a comment on YouTube for this episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co, and I'll talk to you again next week.